I grew up probably from 0 to 18, absolutely hating my father.
Growing up was not easy. My dad was away at the war, so I never really met him until I was a toddler. I remember that he was nervous a lot because he'd been in a war. He had PTSD. And my first recollection as a child, as a baby, was we were in the kitchen and there were diapers in the room that were hanging up, and he accidentally brushed into one of them with his face, and he fell apart. He became angry, he cursed, and I was always afraid of him because he had a short temper.
I was in about 4th grade, and I took my bicycle to the elementary school. I was going in summer school, and it got stolen. I didn't lock my bike, and I remember telling him, and I mean, you thought I would have murdered somebody by the response that I got. I mean, it was like, it was yelling and screaming and peeling off in the car. And I remember I was sitting in the front seat, and I remember trying to get so close to the door because I was so afraid that he was going to hurt me. I was terrified, actually, of my dad.
Another time of fear was because he was in the military. He had to get all these vaccinations in his arms. And he warned me, he said, now, when I come home, I'm going to be sore in this area. And I was about an 8-year-old, and I was happy to see him. And, I went to grab him, and I accidentally grabbed him too hard, and he ended up hitting me, and I ended up being on the floor. And he always scared me.
There was an anger that he carried around, and I feel like my younger self picked up on that anger. So when I was around him, I was always unsettled.
I was a planner, and I had an idea early on what I wanted to be and how I wanted to get there. I think I was 39 years old when I finally completed all of my training and set up practice. And we had already had 2 children. We had Matthew and we had Jonathan. And so kind of when Josh came along, he was sort of the disruptor of that environment.
I wasn't planned. My mom would say, "You're the special child." I kind of took that as almost like an insult of like, I wasn't really supposed to be here. And I kind of felt like that as a kid. And growing up with somebody who I felt hated me and I hated him wasn't a good atmosphere to grow up in.
He was hyperactive, and he was unpredictable, and he drew a lot of energy away from my relationship with Joanne. And I had a lot of resentment toward him because he didn't do what I did when I was a young child like he was. He didn't try to please his parents like I did. He fought against us, and he again was hyperactive, and I didn't know how to handle him.
0 to 8, I probably tried to please him and felt like I don't think I could please him. So I just gave up, and I'm like, I'm gonna be me. I'm gonna do me, and come hell or high water, that's just what's gonna happen. And unfortunately, that wasn't a great thing because it led to more confrontation.
My dad wouldn't beat me, but he would hit me with his belt. And I remember in the fraternity, whenever I was a pledge, whenever they wanted to really get to you, they'd say, "Okay,
grab your ankles." And I was like, I'm not grabbing my ankles. I'm just gonna stand here, you know? Forget you. I don't care what you do. I ain't grabbing my ankles. And then whap!
They'd hit you with the paddle, say.
At 18, I could not wait to get out of the house. I was ready to get out. He was ready to have me out. The hatred and the anger towards each other was a complete hostile environment. When I was about 33, I joined a church and I started to hear about forgiveness. And I started to hear about how unforgiveness can actually lead to depression, lead to anxiety, lead to all of these harmful things that literally can manifest in your brain and in your heart. And I was like, man, I've got some unforgiveness, towards my dad. I'll never forget the time where I was home for Christmas. I was in his garage, in the garage that I grew up in. And I truly wanted to forgive him. I truly wanted to move on. And I just remember praying, God, I don't know how to do this. I want to forgive. I want to forgive him. God, help me, Lord, help me to forgive him. And within that, I feel like the Holy Spirit came over me and something was released. And I actually received my prayer language during that time in his garage by myself, just releasing him of all of that, all of the things that he did to me. So this is 33. I've forgiven him. I came to him. I said, Dad, I apologize. I'm so sorry. I know that I was ornery towards you. I know that I completely disobeyed you. Will you forgive me? I'm sorry, Dad. And he said the same thing to me. He's like, Josh, he's like, will you forgive me? And then I remember we embraced and we gave each other a hug. And I remember as I was hugging him, because we didn't really touch, like that wasn't just anything we did. And I remember as we embraced, he wasn't pulling away, I wasn't pulling away. I remember there was weight that just kind of rolled off of my back. And I remember I was able to give almost like an exhale of like, okay,
He was able to forgive me, and I was able to forgive the way he acted as a young child and a teenager and the rejection that I felt from him.
All of a sudden I get a call from my mom frantically saying, your dad is in the hospital. He's had a brain aneurysm. I don't think he's gonna live. And I was like, oh my gosh. We just started to become friends. Now he's gonna die. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it.
I was working in the office, getting ready to see patients. I was 75 years old. I enjoyed what I did. And all of a sudden, I had the most tremendous headache of anything I had ever experienced. And of course, Joanne came out and said, well, here, have some Tylenol. And about that time, I hit the floor.
It's funny, my wife, I told my wife, I said, hey, there's gonna be a time where, when my parents get older, that we might move to Orlando. And she looked at me and she said, Josh, I will never move to Orlando. And a year later, we're moving to Orlando. And I think the miracle within that is she also had a peace to move to Orlando. And she saw the wounds in me. And she knew that regardless of if it was beneficial for her to move to Orlando, she knew that it was beneficial for me to move to Orlando to reconcile with my dad.
And so at the last couple of years, we have developed a reconciling relationship in which we can both love each other and accept each other and hug each other. And those are wonderful, wonderful things to have in a father-son relationship, not which I never had growing up.
And I think that that's the miracle with our relationship, is that we were both able to forgive one another for what we did to one another and truly move on and truly accept each other, his differences, my differences, and come together with a deep love, a father-son love that unites us still to the day.
I would say he's a close friend. Yeah. I would say I'm his friend too, and that there isn't anything that I wouldn't do for him and for his beautiful wife, Andrea.
I love my dad. I love him. I love him.